All right, thank you so much. So, welcome everybody to double Octofinals of this year's UADC. Congratulations on making it this far. I'll be your chair. My name is Jonathan Tuliao. My preferred gender pronoun is he, him. I'd allow my fellow judges to introduce themselves in the order of the tab.
Hi, I'm Errol. I'm a panelist. I usually have pronouns. Thank you. All the best.
Hi, Narayan here, no preference. Good luck.
All right, thank you so much. So before we begin, kindly remind us of first how you would like to take your POI if it's through voice or through chat. Second, don't forget to always have your check for your voice or check for your video just to ensure that everything is going smooth as possible. Thirdly, if you will be talking about specific protected attributes, please do so in a respectful manner so as to avoid problems with equity. So at this point, are there any questions or any concerns that should be addressed? I guess none. If also maybe I could just request one of my panelists to place the timestamps in the chat below. That would be very much appreciated.
Sure, I can do that.
All right, thank you so much. All right, I think we're okay to proceed. So we are debating under the motion, this House supports a norm where parents are financially transparent to their children. I now call the Honorable Prime Minister to start the debate. Here.
Hello, am I visible and audible panel?
Yes, yes to both.
Apologies panel, there's some echo going on. Okay, retesting audio. Am I audible panel?
Yes, it's perfectly good.
Preferred pronouns he, him, POI is verbal. Please unmute your microphone. I recommend it because I will not be looking at chat. 15 seconds to set up equipment panel. I do apologize. All right, panel. Beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Debating on how to parent a child or to raise one is simply said, you must be a trusting element in a child's life, regardless of what point in their life you are done to be seen, right, panel? Now, firstly, no matter what thing you do towards a child, what dissatisfaction they have, it is always related back to the financial relationships you have with the child, i.e., the tantrums that they throw whenever they go get their favorite Christmas presents, them not being able to go on a holiday just like the other kids in the classes did, them not having to go to pizza every weekend, right, panel? It is inherently tied back to the financial relationships that the parents have towards the children. And these tantrums are even more so when the children don't know the reason why, and especially when the distrust of them, their parents not loving them, comes into fruition, right, panel? Three parts of my speech for today. Firstly, framing. Secondly, substantive. Thirdly, comparatives, right, panel? But firstly, three pieces framing as a whole. Firstly, what is being financially transparent for level series? First level is parents being honest about their livelihood, what they work as, and to the extent of which, what is the likelihood for them to get a promotion or not, to then have possibility of being richer in the future. Second level, their salary and available income in general, how much they get paid, how much they can get paid in the future, is this a consistent thing, are they prefixed towards this certain summation, right, panel? Third level, the commitments, the bills they have to pay. This looks like the parents explaining that not all of their income is disposable, and even if that some of the income is then disposable, they have to be specific to what sector of their life that disposable income goes to, i.e., parents explaining how much healthcare costs, how much their rent for the house costs, how much utility bills cost, right, panel? panel. Final level of framing is that final level of this prong is that parents then have an incentive to simplify things to children according to their level of development. They don't actually have to break it down to the last cent. Second piece of framing for today. What happens when you don't be transparent under our paradigm, right, panel? 3 levels to this. Firstly, because then kids will ask for more because they do not know your financial limitations. B, they derive a sense of transparency and trust. Trust is always a two-way thing, regardless of authority. You can only trust a figure in your life, especially your parents, which then usually results in an authoritative figure once you acknowledge their capabilities to then trust your decision making with them in your life. Parents are already seen as a looming authority amongst other aspects like behavior and major development decisions, such as your healthcare choices as a child and what school you go to. If you lie even further, this trust will increase to the point of which parents will no longer be seen as a nurturing element, rather be seen as something restrictive in your life. You'll be more focused on getting them out of your life rather than working together with them to become a better person. Finally, panel, this is an ongoing process. It will be based on the development stage of the child. As a child will then explain what type of toys they can afford within a certain price margin, the reasons behind it, and maybe as a teenager they explain further on the general expenses, their bills, their mortgages, other commitments they have to then limit the child's personal allowance once they go to college. The children then cannot be hidden from the truth forever, panel, especially from their parents' secrets, because they're living in a world where the internet exists. They can already interact with it to the extent to which they can find out things on their own. It is better for them to find out about something from a trusted source, i.e. their parents, at an early stage, comparatively if they find out from a non-trusted source, which usually have different opinions based on who you find it out about, and comparatively this will result in a much more vague understanding of what financial situations look like under their side. But finally, burdens panel. Proposition has to prove to you two things: why this is okay, benefits a child, and is it in line with modern parenting, and secondly, why this enhances the relationship with a child and parent then. Opposition has to prove to you why lying is okay, and at what age it is then okay to be transparent with a child in any sense. But before moving on to the substantive, yeah, POI.
My kid wants a pizza. I have a lot of disposable income and I also have ability to buy them a pizza, but it's going to they want this pizza all the time. How do you convince your kid not to have a pizza on your side?
Just by you saying your general income as a whole, like, hey, you can have a pizza, but only at this specific time because this is the total salary I have at this moment in time, then yeah, maybe the child will understand I can only afford like 1 or 2 pizzas a month. I don't really see the problem behind that. Moving on to the substantive panel, one as a whole. It was why it adds to the parents being totally honest. Why this go 3 levels to this. Firstly, relationships are more open and built on trust. This can only happen when it's transparent and open. Why, panel? Because trust is a two-way thing, especially kids' trust towards parents due to them being a big figure in their life. You can only trust an authoritative figure once you acknowledge their capabilities, because that is a big portion of control of your life you're giving towards someone. The acknowledgement then results in the consideration within the decision making of the child itself. Therefore, the psyche of the child, comparing their limitations, comparing their quality of life to other children in their classroom, to other friends that they have, then results in the general expectation of a child, the general expectation the child has towards the future of being. At present, what then looks like under opposition model. Opposition model is that whenever a child sees someone else getting a better, more expensive things, they assume then that the parents don't love them because they assume the parents are incapable of buying those things in the first place. Unless told otherwise, children will always assume that their parents are rich or at least able to go beyond the expectations because they see these parents as some sort of authority figure that then lose more control over their own life than their self-being. Secondly, the principle of honesty is basically just this. One side makes a decision under assumption that the other side's decision-making is not intruded upon. I.e., a child is able to ask for an expensive gift because they are under the assumption that that expensive gift does not intrude on a parent's will to then spend money on themselves in the first place. But before that, yeah, what's up?
Yeah, so this is kind of contradictory. If your child doesn't know the social circumstances that lead to you wearing like poorer clothes, for instance, they're not going to assume you're rich. You have to debate within reason.
Panel, realize that a child is, they see their parent as this big figure that gives them whatever they want inherently in the early stages, right? Unless you explain to them that, hey, life isn't all that easy, they're going to assume that way because I already told you, just because of the amount of control the parents have towards a child's life, they're going to assume that they also have the capital to then compensate for that control, and B, just because there's no other comparative to compare otherwise, especially with situations where children are exposed to other rich families, they're still going to assume so. You then have to prove to me why when children see other rich families buying things that they cannot afford, why then they have to explain in an other sense why they cannot afford it in the first place. B, why then that is okay for you to at least tell your children, hey, we cannot buy that just because you don't want to, which then consents to the idea that you love them less. Now, final substantive for today, whether it is good or bad, the financial the parents are honest and transparent. Like right now, I already talked about the amount of control parents have towards the children's life. This then especially translates into the decision making of the parents towards the children. I.e., whenever you tell them to go to a certain school, they expect compensation in some sense. They don't really understand the calculus of you getting education for yourself to get a better job. The only calculus they understand is that when they do something you tell them to do, they will get something in reward. With the lack of that, then results in distrust. Panel. Why don't you find a comparative to that? A, what side is affected the most towards children? B, what side then has more likely to affect children? We already told you on government, A, it affects the children the most because you tell them why you have this certain amount of control over their life. B, why this control then results in compensation limited to your financial capacity. And C, already told you why the comparative behind children's interaction. Plus B, why this control then results in compensation will be less affected on the side proposition. Thank you, panel.
I thank the previous speaker for that speech. To start with the opposition side, may now welcome the leader of opposition. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
I'll start my speech in a few seconds. Setting up my timer. I'll be taking POIs through the chat. I will be taking you up around the 4th or 5th minute if I have the time. I will be starting very shortly. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The problem with side opposite proposition is that they think that this debate particularly revolves around poor parents and the dynamics surrounding, say, people who cannot afford certain things. We don't really think that is a significant delta where this debate is contested, because Srijan tells you in his POI that that children already have some sense of what their ambience actually looks like, right? The societal conditions that they're present in, the clothes they wear, the people that they are around, their culture, the kind of things that, the kind of differences that they see between them and say a very affluent kid in TV or something like that, right? So in some sense, children know what bubble they actually belong to and the kind of dynamics that they have and the lifestyle they cannot really afford just because of the basis of the material conditions that they are actually having, right? The problem with this is that under their side, if you just put a number or if you just put more specificity, proposition does not really show that there is going to be significant change, right? Because notice that trust simply does not just come from like, oh, I make this much money. We think that parents already have some incentive to care for children and gain their trust anyway, right? For example, parents make a lot of sacrifices for the children. They tend to keep the children in better conditions than what they probably are in, which means that they might work extra to probably put their children in a better school, probably give them better lifestyle conditions, and they're more likely to care because of their social, cultural, and biological conditioning, obviously. And children in general are cute, so you're willing to sacrifice more for them. The problem with this is that now the dynamics is not really specific to, say, financial decision making, right? Parents are authority figures and parents are adults, which means that the decisions that they make tend to be very complex in nature and things that children cannot really understand, which means that when you, like, say, invest money in the future, invest money for savings, or you have other complications like you're in debt or you need to owe money to someone, or you just simply don't want to spend it on their children because you don't really think there's good in giving them short-term pleasure. These are things that children simply don't understand, right? So we don't really think that the delta that Prop is contesting this debate on is actually quite significant. Here are a few pieces of characterization that is completely missing from this debate. Firstly, on children. Children are highly impressionable, which means that the ambience that they're around in generally tends to affect them quite significantly, right? They're affected by society, and what they see is like, society, like what society has. Like, for example, we're living in a materialistic society, so probably there's an innate condition for children to ask more and more within their bubble, or probably ask for more, the point at which children go to like very rich shopping centers or go to buy toys and probably just ask for more, right? The problem in prop side is that now you know how much figure your parent is actually making. So when a parent declines to buy, like, say, certain things from you, it then becomes a problem. The thing is that things like patience, things like, say, complex financial decision making, things like just in general making sacrifices or compromises are things that are beyond like what children's emotional calculus can actually understand, right? So they cannot really understand parents' decision making when they decline to buy certain things for their children. They are emotionally vulnerable, right? So when their decision is based on proximity, has and has not, we think that they're less likely to like understand the more complex side of things, but simply understand what is in their proximity and what is not, right? So just knowing that you could have something and you don't really have that, you could buy a gaming console, your parents decline because they don't really see the worth in that, they probably want you to study better, is something that children will simply not understand. And society keeps feeding them that, like, oh, you should play more games, you should do this and that, or more hedonistic pleasures through means of advertisement, through social media, through the TV shows that they actually watch. So they've got a lot of means of reinforcing what they have and what they generally do not have, right? The problem with this disclosure is that it essentially makes their entire like relationship transactional, right? Before I move on to the harms, are there any POIs?
PI,
Yeah.
Children's transition from teenager being emotional to being logical is proof that the emotional psyche when they were young is a result of lack of specificity.
I mean, that's symmetric. Like, they also become mature under our side, but they become mature under your side, knowing that the parents simply did not care enough for them, even when they have the resources to do so. So when they see their friends having certain things, their friends enjoying certain pleasures in life, and the parents prevent them from enjoying those pleasures, that we think that taints the relationship with their parents, right? Under our side, you simply know that you cannot afford certain things, and probably you are better able to respect your parents as an authority figure because you don't really have that specificity. So we think that under our side, children are generally more inclined to believe that whatever decisions that the parents make generally tend to be in their best interests, right? So that ambiguity of like specific income, specific investments, specific assets that you have simply does not exist under our side. So what is the harm of disclosure? Firstly, on transactional relationships, the worth of parents in prop is based on how much they invest in you because there's a specific number to it. The problem starts becoming egregious, the point at which this becomes a norm, right? Which means that there's going to be outer communication. And notice that prop does not contest this debate on norms at all, right? We think that when this is a norm, when you know how much your parents are making, you are more inclined to discuss it with other people. You're more inclined to discuss it with other friends, other parents, their cousins and whatnot. And the point at which parents decline to invest in their children because they don't see good in that, we think that essentially brands them as being selfish, because those are not things that other parents can understand or the society in general can understand, right? And because children don't really have any control over their emotions, they're more inclined to politicize this, and probably this negatively affects parents in being like tainted in a bad light from the children, which means that there's an additional pressure under their side for parents to work extra hard to probably keep that specific number in a better state that they can explain their children that, oh, we are doing well, right? And we think that becomes a problem because the parents are in insurmountable amount of stress. Even if you don't believe this, we think that there is significant pressure placed on children, the point at which they realize their parents are not really doing well, right? It's beyond their emotional calculus to understand that parents are actually in debt, or the parents can only afford 2 pizzas a day. The reason for this is that children simply don't understand how money works. Children simply don't understand how money comes and goes, how investments work, when their parents are at a loss, when their parents' business is actually doing well, or when it's actually not, right? So we think that when there is a debt, there's already a surrounding stress in the family. And the fact that children now have to keep up with their parents saying, oh, we do not really have the money, and continuously keep badgering them because this is something that's going to be talked about in the family for a very long time, means that this creates additional psychological pressure on them, right? And this translates negatively because now children start becoming more, say, conscious about how they spend their money, or probably how they view their family. We think that this taints the parent-child relationship for those reasons. Oppose.
I thank the previous speaker for that speech. To proceed with side government, may I now invite the Deputy Prime Minister. Here, here.
Hi, I just want to make sure I'm visible and audible.
Yep, yes to both.
POIs verbally, only interject me once. I take you 1 before 5. All right, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The first thing we need to begin with is the characterization of what children look like and how they comprehend information. Opposition continuously tells that, oh, children don't know how to manage finance, you know what is amount. Note, when they go to school, parents give them money. For example, 10 ringgit a day or 10 rupees a day. They go to canteen, they buy food. They know what transaction looks like. They know what depletion of finite resources look like and the inability to spend or inability to purchase things in their financial life. That means these children have a known thing about transaction and how they are finite resources. Secondly, children are also able to understand better as they are growing. Not in opposition, they tell children cannot comprehend. But as the children, from being a young child growing into a teenager, there is a lot of gaps that need to socially fill into the children. There's this false presumption with children that if my parents can afford, why are they unable to do it? Therefore, it is hard on the wall of hope, firstly, to continuously lie, what Hari told you is principally wrong, but also secondly, the breaking point where children finally realize it is unable for their parents to provide, it's much more worse. One responses, they claim that children have some sense of social circumstance where they know by in terms of clothing the lesser than others. In op, they claim that, oh, parents are able to understand this. Note, when parents decline to buy things with a false presumption children can afford, it becomes a problem because the decision is based on proximity. Two responses. A, if children are that socially intelligent, children can also understand that savings for future is important, insurance for well-being is important, that parents are investing for them. B, a child is more likely to understand the finite resources of planet Earth because Harid already told you, being financially transparent means parents will tell you A, how much
POI.
they earn, B, how much the expenditure is in terms of mortgage for house, for their car, how much is spent for utility bill. That means a children knows how much is being spent and what is the disposable income the parents have at the end of the day. Meaning children can actually see what is better in terms of their family's sustainability and why parents choose to spend such carefully. Yes, your PY.
You have the fiat to say that probably financial transparency will happen. But the conversation after that, you don't have fiat to say that's always likely to be positive. Why are parents likely to proceed like being really transparent about
Okay, I get
the
you.
rest of the
The
things?
motion is simple. Parents will be transparent about their financial situation. It's going to be happen at all times. My first argument, why children are more likely to develop an independent financial life. Note panel that children who are aware that their financial situation is more likely to develop an incentive to develop their own financial stability. This looks like them needing to keep themselves afloat. This looks like things wanting to get the things they want to buy. Why is this true? Note a children growing up into a teenager or moving into adolescent they want to learn ways how to make additional income to support themselves because now they are aware that they know that they cannot depend fully on their parents when they're moving out from their home into college or university. What does this look like? This look like children A doing part-time jobs like tutoring, selling simple sundry items like biscuits. C looks like them learning additional skill. What is the likelihood of this then happening? When children are aware that they're in financial scrutiny, they know that they want a new pair of football or the new pair of boots. There's an active income for them to actually earn money for themselves and
Clarification.
to get the things that they want. What is the comparative then in op? No, children are continuously going to throw tantrum to their lying parents for not buying the things that they want. Children are more likely to develop anger in their world, hatred towards their parents in their world for not buying them because children now have a false perception that my parents have a lot of money, but they choose not to spend for me and their parents are lying. What is the metric of weighing for this argument then? Note the worst case in government is children getting disappointed when their parents reveal their financial situation at first, but over time they're likely to get over it because people will accept the fact. But now the comparative in our world is that children develop an active incentive to earn to become financially independent to fulfill the things they need. The comparative in the world of op is children have an accumulation of tantrum towards their parents over time. Why is this bad? It damages the relationship between child and parents, also the trust the parents have to build with their children. Note in opposition, they cannot say, oh, in our world also children will accept because in opposition children already have this false presumption which is accumulated that their parents can afford, that they can afford, but yet they still choose not to provide. Children cannot comprehend the reason in your world, when you say I have the money, I will get it for you, but just not now. This is
Point.
even worse because in their world, it is going to drive children to steal money because they don't get what they ask from their parents, even though the parents say, I have the money, I'm going to get it to you. There is no incentive to be actively independent because the parents give assurance that they can provide and they will provide and there's enough money to sustain the family. But panel, even at the worst case, let's say both houses want to say children can accept and become financially independent. The metric then here is who starts first and earlier. Obviously, the children in the world of government start first because they're made aware earlier by their parents. Therefore, it is early for them. There's an early starting point for them to become financially independent. This looks like them saving money for themselves in the future compared to the world of opposition. We start to be financially independent earlier. The second argument then, in which world are children more likely to appreciate their parents' little effort? Also, direct response to which world children appreciate parents' sacrifices. In Gov's world, children are more likely to cherish all the little moments or experiences that their parents provide. Why is this good? Note, for example, if a parent brings their children out to buy KFC in a month or choose to go holiday locally instead of foreign, even though it's only happening once in a month or once in a while, it becomes very special to children because of two reasons. A, children are now able to realize that the limited resource their parents have, yet they choose to spend those kind of things for their children. B, children can comprehend their parents' sacrifice, who at most time have to work extra or eat less themselves just to provide for their children. Why is appreciating parents important in this debate? Note that this makes children aware that with my mom or dad's education level, they're doing the best out of their life to provide me with their food. Even better, all the parents' effort, like surprising the children on birthday, maybe with their favorite game or handphone, makes the child to reflect all the sacrifice or the overtimes the parents had to work, the multiple jobs they had to do just to buy those things and make it happen for their children. In government, note that children are less likely to complain or compare with what other parents are providing because their children they develop a consciousness that this is the best my parents can provide. What is the comparative then in opposition? Parents are going to constantly lie and fake, and they're also going to try to postpone the arrangement. Things like, if you want pizza, you will say, okay, no problem, I will get the pizza to you end of the month. The rationale of a parent is, I don't have the money now, end of the month I'll get a salary, but the children doesn't know that. By the time you choose to do that at the end of the month, the things you don't get then accumulates for them, and they have this constant feeling that, oh, why other parents can do better, why my parents can't do it immediately. What will happen when the children continuously blame you as a parent for not doing these things despite having the money or capability? What is the metric of weighing here? In government, a child is able to comprehend in terms of social circumstance, this is the best my parents can do, and appreciate that my parents can do at the best of their capacity, even though other parents can provide. In opposition, the child will not appreciate or value anything the parents do because there's a false assumption my parents actually have the resources to do better for me, but they choose not to do this. What is the worst case in government then? Even if a child fails to understand why is my parent not doing this, the ability for them to comprehend the finite resources and the resource being spent of them is much more better in our world than a world where these children don't understand why my parents have money, but they still choose not to do it. What have I told you in this debate? Firstly, an intelligent child who has some sense of social circumstance can understand transactional relations, can understand parents' disposable income. Because even if they don't understand as a child, growing up into a teenager, they will still understand and are able to fill the gaps. I've told you, children are more likely to develop an independent financial life, and children are more likely to appreciate their parents' little effort. I've never been prouder to propose.
I thank the previous speaker for that speech. To proceed with the case of side opposition, may now invite the Deputy Leader from. Here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
All right, give me a few seconds before I start. Proposition side simply does not understand the non-financial elements of decision making. Whenever parents make decisions about giving or not giving a product, they take into consideration a range of factors, whether that product is good for you, whether or not you are rationally capable of making a decision or the use out of that product, but also the fact that a lot of other diversified sources of your financial importance is also probably factored into that product or decision making about it. The reason why we are dealing in a scenario where parents probably have more money than a child is because the money that you give to a child, be it the larger portion of your diversified money that you share, is still going to be less compared to what child receives compared to what parents earn. The reason for that is children are likely to be hedonistic creatures. The reason for this is they are more like they are not emotionally developed. They have underdeveloped biology. They also see instantly gratifying pleasures, a lot of which means that their ability to seek the pleasures of this kind overwhelm their rational decision making even when they want it. For example, like they want pizza all the time. They want certain things based on what their friends have. A lot of these kind of parameters means that children are always likely to expect more in regards to what parents can give. That is why the alternative characterization about children being reasonable isn't true in financial decisions, because adults aren't reasonable enough in financial decisions. I'm not exactly sure why this is true. Second thing is, this debate requires them to set a norm about this kind of things. That is to mean, why is it necessary for a parent in any situation, any world, to disclose their private property, which they earn through their own personal means for their own personal pleasures? The kind of money that goes into children or probably making their basic needs met might be an important parameter that is in consideration. There is no reason why they suggest why parents need to go out and give this information to the children, who oftentimes have no say in this financial decision making, cannot help or harm this kind of financial decision making. I'm not entirely clear where they are going with this. But we talked about complex financial decision making. Their analysis is children see the transactions occurring in canteen, and that is why they know all of it. I was very with. Our analysis is parents probably have seen this much more time for a longer period. They are more able to make this kind of decisions. But I told you a couple of things. There are other elements that children can see. For example, like long-term benefits, which is better for children in the long term. But the more importantly, children are likely to expect this. Their argument is children will understand it. The reason for this is because they see that the parents' financial status is bad, and that's why they are more likely to understand the kind of benefits that they give. This is not true for a few reasons, because we can still lie on our side. Because what most of the parents do when they are asked about this kind of situations is they just go out and say, oh no, I don't want this anymore. I don't want to give this to you because I don't have any money. A lot of these things can still exist when I have money. The fact is, if they are sure about the level of control that parents can have, we do believe that parents can control the way in which parents give this kind of information. That means parents are always able to lie on their side. There is no way for children to verify the exact financial reports, because a lot of these things are not going to be transparent. That is to mean children, because of the social conditions that they live in, but also from the communication within the parents, are always likely to know that there is some, like in some sense, that these parents aren't as rich as the other kid that goes and drives in a Lamborghini. The next, if you assume children are smart, you have to assume they are going to notice this. The second important characterization to net is their reaction is they will accept. There is no merit to this analysis rather than saying that children are rational. We say they're likely to expect more and they're likely to demand more from this kind of parents. But parents also feel an internal pressure to give more when they disclose exactly how much money that they earn. For example, if I say I earn $10,000, my children ask for more money from me, I'm more likely to give it. This oftentimes distorts them from their own personal calculation of how they want to take care of the children. This oftentimes limits the level of freedom through which they can spend their money, but also the kind of harms that come from not investing in otherwise relevant factors which are not short-termist or instantly gratifying to the child. The impact of this is in so many folds. When parents don't do this, this is likely to rupture the relationship in a bad way. This is more important because they were clear about financial transactions, but they cannot assume they will be clear about the rest of the process. They have to prove in the most logical interpretation of the world. For example, if parents think that the money is theirs and they have earned it on their own, they are less likely to give it away to children on all instances. So in so many situations, parents are likely to exert control as a mechanism to silence the kids about constantly nagging them to give them more money, constantly nagging them to give more resources. A lot of this harms parents-children relationship because the expectation from children will be on the proportion of income that children earns versus, and that is also how children are likely to look as a measure of care that their parents have towards them. Note that there is no response on opposition. When we said that a lot of this kind of relationships are likely to be transactional, there are other mechanisms for it. For example, a lot of the children want to go out and show to their friends what they have got. They are more likely to post these kind of things in social media. They're also likely to politicize this kind of financial transactions with their friends and peers. That means they're more likely to be more communicative about how much they have, what their parents have. A lot of this sets unfair expectations upon parents because other people are also going to judge you. Oh, this person earns this much and is not spending on the child. A lot of these things also affect the way in which parents and children interact, because one, they are more likely to not be open and transparent about other things if they're transparent about money, because this oftentimes requires, yeah, I'll take a POI.
If children can learn about financial situations outside, what's to stop them from being supplemented by their own parents?
Sorry, I don't get your POI, but the fact is this, right? So basically, the question isn't whether or not children can learn about financial situation exactly. The question here is, you have sort of idea of how your parents live based on other benefits. So it is your duty to prove your extra benefit on your side. But in certain scenarios, let's say parents withhold money from them or don't give them money that they probably need to. The idea is, we don't think that giving more money to a child is always a good thing. In so many situations, when there is instantly gratifying needs, it is more likely that this child is likely to go into more hedonistic pleasures that money can buy. They're likely to make irrational decisions that are likely to be bad for themselves. That is to be in situations where parents don't have direct control or direct oversight over this kind of children, it is harmful. But second, the lack of trust has complications and issues. Parents have competing needs. We talked about it a lot of situations. Children aren't their only priority, but also short-term needs of children aren't their only priorities. A lot of being forced by this kind of narrative also reduces the ability to make independent financial decisions, which also harms the quality of life parents have. This debate has never been about parents from side proposition. That is something you need to address. Probably at this point, it's too late. The next important thing on their decision making is also about what this leads to the children. Children are particularly vulnerable. At the point this trust breaks, there is less communication with the parents, but also less ability for parents to help them. The control that they say is very necessary for parents to go out and save these kind of children from precarious and dangerous situation. It only occurs at the point children trust their parents. This is likely to occur because fake information, if children believe it's true information for them, and that is why we get the benefits on their side, they get no benefits of ours. Very proud to oppose.
I thank the previous speaker for that speech. To proceed with government side, we now welcome the government whip. Here.
Hi, can I just confirm if I'm visible and audible?
Yep, yes.
All right. POIs, please verbally interrupt me, but do not heckle me. Pronouns, no preferred gender pronouns. And I'll start in a few seconds. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, the relationship that oftentimes shapes and molds a person is the relationship between a parent and a child. As in any relationship, we argue that honesty plays an important part in shaping someone. Opposition has a big burden to defend why lying is ultimately for the greater good of the child, or why finding out on their own is eventually better for the child. 3 things I'll be doing in my speech. Firstly, technical flaws of opposition side. Secondly, a comparative on issues in today's debate, proving why side government take today's debate. And thirdly, a summary of government's case. 3, technician has been very uncharitable in terms of the relationship between parents and children. We argue things like the love of a parent, that love that parent has for their children, the ability of parents to buy things for their children are things that are mutual on both sides. Opposition's whole argument on how it now becomes a transactional relationship not changed on either side. Second technical flaw on opposition side. Opposition has also been uncharitable on the understanding of a child. They responded to us by saying that children are highly impressionable and understand society because of modernization and would eventually understand how much their parent earns and what their parent earns and the mortgages that their parents would have to pay. But at the same breath, they argue towards us that children would not be able to comprehend if their parents explain towards them their financial state, right? So we argue all of these contradictions in opposition's case. Thirdly, opposition misconstrues our whole framing, right? Their major argument is how on explaining your financial state is a whole complex idea. Understand that, panel, on our side, we're not giving textbooks to these children. We're not having lectures every month that parents have for their child. On our side, we simply explain things like basic salary. We explain like commitments that parents have. And eventually, as a child grows up, possibly towards teenage years where they have matured brains, we think that eventually things would evolve, right, towards things like more complex things like mortgages or specificity in terms of salary that their parents accrue. These are things that opposition clearly doesn't understand by government's case. Moving on towards the issues that we have today. First issue, in which world is the trust between parents and children worse off? We think this whole issue on trust is an important issue because we think that trust eventually develops the child, and the benefits that we have, all of it depends on trust, and even on opposition side, they fail to prove this. Firstly, panel, we argue that children perceive things very differently. This is something that hasn't been engaged in opposition side. Children see things like whether parents are like other parents. They look like children looking at what you buy them and basically the quality of life that you offer them comparatively towards other parents, right? Why is it then a problem in opposition's world, right? Two things. Firstly, without knowledge of financial situation, we argue that this is most of the time when child would conclude that parents love them less because parents probably buy them lesser things comparatively towards other parents, right? Second thing, without this confirm on how the financial state of their parents is, we think that children would possibly just have their own inferences on the likelihood of the financial state of their parents. This looks like children probably inferring that their parents are probably in a different financial state, probably more rich or more poor, whatever it is, right? But at the end of the day, we think that the exclusive benefit that we have on our side is that we don't want children to have influences on their own, on their financial state of parents. At least on our side, we think that it's better that the conclusion that they have on their financial state is something that their parents tell them, right? That something comes directly from the parents itself. Secondly, what happens then when children finds out their parents' financial state in both worlds, right? We already told you that it's likely eventually, and opposition kind of agrees to this, that eventually children will find out on their own, right? So what is the difference in both worlds? In Gulf's world, we argue that as in parents told them, whatever their state of family is, whether they are poor or they are rich or middle class families, we argue that it is something that they go through together, right? So if it's something that taxes them emotionally because their parents are probably poor, we will also argue that it's something that at least go through to their parents. They at least have guidance towards their parents in terms of their financial state and guidance in terms of how to spend properly, right? Comparatively in ops world, when they find out eventually and when the trust isn't there because their parents didn't even tell them in the first place, we argue that it is something that they go through alone. They'll have financial anxiety alone. They'll be scared. They'll have no guidance. And eventually this would lead towards the independence of the child being something that's totally bad because eventually they wouldn't want guidance from the parents in the first place, right? Thirdly, opposition argues that children would understand that whatever they do is the interest of the child, right? Firstly, we argue that a child would not necessarily think like way. If you're going to argue that child cannot understand this complexity of things, I don't think you can argue on this idea how children would suddenly understand that everything their parents do is for the benefit of the children, right? But even if they do, then why is it bad to just be more detailed about your financial state to your child? The biggest burden that opposition has is that they haven't proved to us at a single point in their speech, why is it bad that when children don't understand? If children don't understand on our side, on the financial state of their parents, then nothing happens. These children would still be the same, right? So we don't really see the harm of children not understanding in the first place. Fourthly, as a parent, even if you are rich, it does not mean you have to buy things every day for your child, right? Even in our side, where parents tell you about their financial state, we argue that they still have an authority figures and children would still listen to them. Opposition's argument on how children would suddenly like blackmail their parents or request for more things from their parents is something that is non-existent, right? It doesn't change how much your parents spend on you, but it just explains why do they spend like they do and just gives a proper idea on the financial state of your parents. But before I move on towards my weighing, yes, sure, POI.
I understand my parents are poor, but I still want to buy the movie ticket or a pizza because there is significant peer pressure and I'm likely to make an emotional decision. Why is it good to be financially transparent? How will you convince your child?
Exactly. If you really want to buy something that's over your price limit, I think it's more better if you are more understanding towards your parents' financial state. If you're understanding that your parents support, it's more likely they'll appreciate, yes, my parents still do love me, but probably they couldn't afford this because of their financial state. Comparatively, on your side, when you have no idea on your parents, to avoid on our side, and we would avoid on our side. So let's look at the comparatives here, right? Understand that sacrifices and love of a parent is the same eventually. The importance of this issue that is in Gulf's world, if a child knows, the trust is eventually better. If they don't understand, nothing really bad comes of it. In ops world, they will eventually understand and eventually infer on whatever they want, self-inference, and eventually thinking how parents don't love them. So what is the harm of child really not understanding is something that opposition didn't really explain to us. Second issue, which is the short issue, in which world does children become more independent? We argue on our side, at least comparatively, firstly, when you go through with this with parents, when you have guidance from parents, you're more better knowledgeable in terms of financial aid and financial state. Secondly, we also argue that you're more aware of the financial state that you have, which means you appreciate things more, which means that you make better financial decisions on our side. What government proposes to you is an understanding of trust built between parents and children. We argue to you that this is the utmost importance in terms of educating your child and properly creating a relationship that is sustainable and filled with trust. With all the reasons, proud to propose.
I think the previous speaker for that speech to proceed with side opposition may now welcome the opposition with. Here.
Give me a sec. I like my POIs to chat. Specifically chat, please don't interrupt at any point. Otherwise I will cry. And then no one will have a good time. Anyway. Starting in 3, 2, 1. So logic is something adults have trouble with, as evidenced by government speech. But for some reason, government thinks children will be fine with making extreme and complex logical decisions, and also conclude from that my parents understand that X and Y is bad for me or good for me. Here's the fundamental problem with government, right? We say that long-term decisions are hard for children to understand, particularly in their developmental years, because they just don't have the intellectual capacity and ability to do these sort of things. Their response was, oh, but you can buy stuff in the cafeteria, so they do financial transactions. Yes, adults struggle with taxation. They struggle with investing their money properly. They struggle with debts and all these sort of things. These are adults who have many, many years of experience and ability over these children. But for some reason, the fact that you can buy a tomato at a fucking cafeteria is what decides how financially capable you are, right? Just notice how bizarre that analysis is on their side. I want to talk about a few more things specifically in response to government whip. And I'm going to talk about the two things that witness this debate. A few things in terms of response. They say, parents want to buy things for children on both sides anyway, so it won't make it transactional. This misses the bulk of opposition's case, though. We said this is symmetric on both sides, but the difference is when you know exactly how much your parents make, you're probably going to ask for more, right? The relationship is going to be based on financial incentive. Government's analysis was specifically focused on that. They said, if they know how much I make, they won't ask for more than one pizza a month. Or if they, but the converse is also true. If you're rich, they're going to keep asking for more pizzas. And if the only disincentive you have is money, then obviously your child's going to eat more. What we said was, if these things become more explicit on opposition, the way you understand how your parents love you is decided on how much money they spend on you. And because children are short-termist, because children care, and because children are relativist in how they understand happiness, they're going to compare with other people and find their own parents lacking. We told you on opposition second that in the vast majority of instances, for a number of mechanisms, parents are always going to spend less than what children are happy with. In most cases, this is fine because, like government says, they're authority figures, so they're probably going to be okay with it. But also, like Shizen says, we can just lie to our children, or we can just be unclear. We don't have to tell them we have this much money in the bank. We can just say we don't have the money. In the vast majority of cases, that's okay. That's the status quo. Government assumes for some reason the status quo just doesn't work. It does in most cases. You had to defend the additional slight benefit of doing this versus all the harms that come from it. They haven't made any attempt to compare. The second thing then is, we're not giving them textbooks, is what they say, for why they will be able to understand it. Yes, but you also have to understand that college, for instance, is really expensive. Financial security in the future is really expensive. But also, you want to save money for retirement as a parent. You have concerns of your own needs that you care for that children might simply not understand. For them, the fact that they can have a pizza every week might add up to $100 extra of expenditure, right? They might want a console every second year, might add up to $600 extra of expenditure. All of these things add up to make your college experience worse, add up to make your quality of life worse, because maybe you're not affording that extra furniture you needed. Maybe you're not affording the other things your parents see that you don't, right? But these are things government just doesn't want to talk about. For some reason, they know everything. And for some reason, just talking about it will solve it. I just don't see where the mechanisms work here. Trust and children perceiving things differently. What does government say? They say, if you don't know how much money you make, you think that you're worth less. No, instead you can just say you don't afford it. But second, we're authority figures, so we could probably accept it anyway. But third, We don't have to be specific on all, but we can just say we don't have the money to afford this, or we have the money to afford this. This debate isn't about opposition just not giving your child any financial literacy. That's insane. Like, parents can probably still teach them about how taxation works, about how investments work, and why it's important to do so. I just don't know why it won't happen. Government just assumes that's something that government opposition won't do. This also deals with the response about guidance, right? Not having it. No, schools provide it, so there is external guidance. Parents are going to provide it anyway. You don't have to tell them the exact figure you're earning or the exact expenses you have to talk to them about financial literacy. I just don't see why this is true. Finally, if you're rich, you don't have to buy anything. It doesn't change how much they spend. No, we told you the incentives children have are very, very specific. They're short-termist, they're hedonistic, and we've given you mechanisms for why this is the case. If all of this is true and you don't challenge it, you have to accept the fact that children are going to want more than what their parents are willing to spend on them, and are going to feel bad because parents don't spend on it. Because you give them specific figures of how much they earn, that hurt is more magnified. So the trust you want to build is much, much worse on government. So just have to deal with that analysis. We were very engaging. You didn't want to talk to us. That's okay for us because you're losing. Finally, love and sacrifice is kind of weird because it's symmetric. I just don't see what's the delta here. You guys needed to explain that a little bit better. Yes, I'll take your POI.
In both worlds, children will get hurt, but at least on our world, they will try to then make logic of why.
Why is that? Because they know how much their parents make. What's the mechanism beyond that? Because that, for some reason, the truth is what's going to solve everything on government, even though you don't explain how children handle the truth. We do on Srina's speech. We do on Nishan's speech. We told you these are the reasons why they're going to react poorly to these sort of things and why worse outcomes are going to result in the future in terms of the trust, but also external factors like society thinking that these parents don't love their children as much and, like trying to isolate or ostracize them or all these sort of harms that government never addresses. Right then, quickly, the first question, children, who explains them better? We say intellectual capacities are largely evolving. Their response to this was, but like teenagers are more mature because they have specificity. No, it's experiences, but also literally the fact that your brain grows and becomes more capable as time passes. Their analysis just doesn't fly. What do they want? And we're the only side that actually analyzed how they make these decisions, right? All they say is, but like if you know how much you make, then you won't ask the same things. Where's the mech? The third thing we said was short-termism versus long-termism necessarily means there will be an inherent conflict on government that we can solve because we don't give them specificities, we can lie to them, we can figure out other ways of giving them answers that they will eventually be satisfied with. On government, because they know exactly how much they make, and because their incentive structures are so warped, it necessarily means it's going to cause a lot more problems, right? So they're going to be not able to comprehend this in most cases, but even if they get the fundamental basics of it, their incentive structures mean that they're going to act in poor ways, which means generally they're worse off. What changes then? How children interact with their parents because of trust. The fact that you can't say no without having like a financial incentive on government for some reason, like we just clear, we say there are other ways in which you can do this. And because there are other ways that exist that children are also going to accept, it's just not going to cause as much of harm as they think it is. But outward perceptions, which is they just lose this debate entirely. We told you that other people also look at how these interactions happen and you result in getting ostracized or whatever, but they also shape children's expectations from their parents. For all of these reasons, you have to vote off.
I thank the previous speaker for that speech. To conclude for side opposition, we now welcome the opposition reply speaker. Here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
All right, I'll start. How can you magically transfer a kid into an adult? Just give them specificity. That is opposition mech. A few things that we want to clarify at the end of this speech. Their mechanism is when you convey honesty, that is the only mechanism through which there will be better children-parent relationship. We told you, if their argument is true, that when you are able, as a parent, are likely to have a lot of control over the information that you send it to children, but a lot of your financial income or a lot of these things are entirely private exchanges that people don't explicitly or exactly know about, then your ability to tell these children what you earn or what you are likely to benefit from is high. That means that is to mean that children are still likely to make decisions based on what parents tell to them, as opposed to what is right and exact. And that is why they cannot claim trust on their side, because on our side, children can manipulate the kind of information that they give, not manipulating children in any ways, but the information that they give to make sure that children perceive it in a positive way. Because there are two things that we said here. One, that children have ability to sway parents' decision making about this, or either get hurt on the process itself. We told you that parents love their children. We also told you that children have some kind of shared relationship with parents. That means parents are likely to take care of them anyway. But this also means that children have some leverage to exert a lot of things from parents when they don't have the financial or moral capacity to do so. Their response to this was children are going to be rational about this. But we have proved time and again with a lot of mechanisms that say that children are less likely to be rational, at least not as rational as comparable to parents. But what is the harm there? The harm is they are using their parents' money and do have the ability to do so because of the existing leverage. If that is so, then whether or not parents' ability to lie depends whether or not they can benefit them. That is to mean children's health, children's betterment, also the total betterment of the family depends on the ability for parents to lie in this kind of situations. Because of few things. We said that children undergo a lot of competing decision-making calculus, but most likely the most dominant one is going to be emotional. I can understand my parents are poor, but I still want to get the pizza. The reason for this is one, we have significant peer pressure. My friend wants to get a pizza. We want to go to a movie. A lot of these things have significant pressure on me. Second, I'm likely to make an emotional decision based on instantly gratifying parameters. But next, we didn't earn for that money. This was earned by my parent. So it's so easy for me to spend. And that is why children spend a lot of their parents' money without knowing its true worth. Somehow in proposition, they are going to know the true worth of money, which they never earned. And they are probably going to be rational about it. And that is to mean children are likely to force parents into making a bad decision. One, it creates unfair expectations upon parents to always provide when they can. The important calculation here is parents always make more than how much they are giving the children. So that is why children do have grounds to ask and expect more, because there is more money on the bank that is not given to them. And children are going to see that because instantly gratifying parameters are likely to force them into that decision making. Proposition's burden was to prove why that is not the case. Only thing that they say is children are going to be rational about it. So in the best case scenario, children understand everything. They understand their parents are poor, but they're still compelled by emotional parameters and the fact that they cannot understand future benefits, or probably that fact that pizza is not good for health, means that they are likely to make bad decisions within that kind of situation. The impact of this is harm towards children, but harm towards relationship, because they look at their parents with a lens of financial transaction. You see that, oh, they didn't give me money, so they are not good parents. This is further politicized when they go out and tell their peers about this kind of issues. And this creates unfair expectations on the part of parents and children. This is harmful because parents' ability to help children depends on the leverage that they have over them or the control that they have over them. In their side, they lose all of control because children oftentimes think that their parents are lying to them, or not lying to them, but again, not giving to them as much as required. That's why we're very proud of.
I thank the previous speaker for that speech. To finally conclude this debate, may we now welcome the government reply speaker. Hear, hear.
Hi, just want to make sure I'm visible and audible.
Yep, yes.
Starting my speech in 3, 2. What is this debate about in terms of parents being financially transparent? What are the things that children can understand and appreciate? And is complex accounting really hard? The first question then is, in which world do children appreciate their parents better? Opposition says that, oh, children will appreciate sacrifices because they don't know how much they earn and everything is special. They also say that children all of a sudden have this comprehensive thinking that they can understand. But also in the same world, they say that accounting is complex. Is accounting actually complex? We have told you that how children grow up from being a child into a teenager. Being a teenager, studying mathematics, studying additional mathematics, obviously children know what transaction look like. Accounting is not so complex for them. That is why in our world we have given you pragmatic reasons why children appreciate their parents better, because they understand the finite resources parents send and how they spend it mostly towards their children. The second question then, in which world will children actually comprehend financial transaction? Op says that children won't understand what is best for them, the utility of products bought for their parents. But then Op also says they will understand all this transaction all of a sudden from other sources, such as social media. Our question is, why in a world children can understand and comprehend external sources, cannot they comprehend the same transaction when their own parents are revealing it to them? The burden from op is to defend, while learning from outside is much more better than actually knowing from your own parents. What is the comparison here? In government, parents give a clear-cut explanation on what spending looks like in every level. In opposition, from external sources, children are learning or exposed to simplified or less accurate information. This looks like if my father's, for example, an electrical engineer earns 25,000 a month. What the children doesn't see is A, even though the same job titles their parents' home, they may earn less due to work seniority. Children don't take into account family expenditures like mortgage, utility bill, and groceries. Children are likely to have a false presumption and demand more from their parents because there's no accurate information since every family expenditure is unique. What is the tiebreaker then? In op, they fail to defend why this inaccurate or in most cases false information is much more better for the children. In our world, we told to you that even if in a world children don't understand, they're more likely to comprehend better because it's their own parents telling them. The level of trust that they have is much more better than an external resource. What is the third question then? In which world will children understand their parents' financial state? Op has this unmechanized claim that children will want pizza regardless of how much their parents earn. And they are very dismissive that their children will never learn. Panel, let's take them at their best case. Even if it is true that these children is never learn, how is op in their world going to convince their children by lying about their parents' salary or why being silent is better? What is the metric then to break this claim? In government, if the child understands what their parents are spending, it is already a net benefit in our world. In worst case, even if the children don't understand, the harm is zero. There is no negative harm in our world. But in opposition note, they're already running in a negative harm because children's information firstly is from an external resource which is not accurate. And B, parents have to constantly lie and there's accumulated resentment upon the children because they don't understand why their parents doing this choice. The fourth question then is, will parents need to provide for children just because they have a lot of money? Op says that parents are forced, children are short-termists, they want fulfillment. Two responses. In status quo, Op already mechanizes that children have a social understanding in terms of where like their clothes and spending. Our question is simple. Why in a world children already knows that my dad drives a Mercedes, my dad owns a Semi-D, they won't already know that their parents are already damn rich. They already are requesting these things in status quo. Why isn't the harm already accumulating much worse in your world? Because they already have the same social understanding of how wealthy my parents is. Means in status quo, they're already demanding all these things. What is the comparative in government? A, Melville told to you that parents have their own way of parenting their child. Excess money doesn't mean I need to give everything they ask because the power dynamic in both worlds is not in the child's favor. It is the parents' hands on both worlds. But B, if they understand, they are able to comprehend better the parents' financial choice and what are the things they choose to provide for children. The last question is why transparency builds trust and prevent resentment over a longer time. Note that they op claims relationship becomes transactional just because parents choose to reveal the income. In op, the harm is symmetrical because also in their world they claim children already have this information, means the relationship is already becoming transactional. The harm of not being transparent is then if they find out later, it leads to terrible resentment because my parent could have done all this for me, but they choose to hide it from me. Accumulated resentment and hatred towards parents accumulates long-term hate towards the child. In comparison, Gov, for rich parents, children will appreciate that they have been included in transparency and build better trust from their parents. For all these reasons, I've been prouder to propose.
I thank the previous speaker for that speech. That concludes this round. You may now virtually cross the house, and I remind everyone that you should leave the call in the breakout room and wait for the decision at the final verdict in the main hall. Thanks, everyone.